If you love classic cars, then Donald loves you.
There's just something really special about driving a sports car designed during the late 1960s. The spirit of optimism of that time can just be felt everywhere in every part of the car. And it's especially true in the car I'm driving right now, this 1970 Datsun 240Z. You know, it's often spoken of in the collector car world that the real true interest in collector cars follows a very tight bell curve. The cars that we came to know as teenagers, that we then lust after and finally buy when we're in our 40s and can afford it. And it's true that the cars that leave the deepest impressions are those that capture our imaginations at an impressionable age. And the Datsun 240Z came out when I was in high school. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a really neat car. It sort of looks just like the English and Italian sports cars that I love so much, but it's made by Datsun? Didn't seem to make much sense. And I had not, at that point, really paid any attention, even though I was reading competition press and Auto Week on a regular basis, how well the Datsun 1600 and 2000 Roadsters, called the Fair Lady in Japan, had done in SCCA racing. So it wasn't as if Datsun was brand new to the sports car game, but they certainly were a game changer when it came to the sports car game. And there are moments in the manufacturer's life when a certain redefinition of the brand and what the brand stands for comes with a single model. And Nissan, while they were working very hard to establish the Datsun brand here in the US as a maker of dependable, economical cars for the family, they also knew that the value of a halo car was very important, and they also saw the size of the sports car market and the opportunity it represented, because they wouldn't be competing with the big American manufacturers in that market, because obviously they had basically abandoned the true sports car market in America. So they set their targets at the British and the Italians. And people have variously described the 240Z as a discount E-Type or the poor man's Corvette. And the truth of the matter for me is that that's not really the case. This is honestly a product of the company. It has all the brand characteristics that we would come to know and love about Nissan products in the future, but distilled in a way, again, thinking about what was happening in the 1960s across the automotive landscape and what Honda was producing with some of their small sports cars, what Toyota had done with the 2000 GT, and then this car comes, which brings that whole ethos of balance and value for money, but not at a price. This car does not feel cut rate in any way, shape, or form. It feels substantial, it feels comfortable, and yet also incredibly sporty. This is really an incredible achievement that I think a lot of people can't really understand the magnitude of. When you think about the specs on paper, and I always find it interesting to compare paper specs with actual experience, because this is a 2.4 liter inline six, produces 150 horsepower. Today, what does that mean? But I come to, again, the balance. The car doesn't weigh very much, somewhere around 2,500 pounds. And the chassis is so well designed that it is immediately responsive. It uses every one of those 150 horses to the best advantage possible. It's got a very solid structure. There are a couple of little creaks and rattles that you might not find in a $50,000 car at the time, but this wasn't a $50,000 car. And this is a car that not only redefined the entry-level sports car in a way that the British were completely unprepared for, And I think it shook up the Italians as well and showed other Japanese manufacturers what could be accomplished, because this was a great volume seller, in addition to being a great traffic puller for the showrooms. The Z grew, as cars do, starting out as this two-seater with this 2.4 liter engine, to later the 260Z, which also added a 2+2 component, the 280Z, 280ZX, and was later reinvented as a new Z. But this is a car that, not surprisingly, has a devoted and brilliant following, because it's a car that people can really relate to, and it's also a car that's incredibly usable. It's not at all finicky or temperamental. It's easy to drive well and flatters the driver, in fact. And the people that own it are people you want to talk to. This particular example is, as a 1970, an early 1970, rather different from many of the cars that followed. The people that follow the 240Z market very closely are often very attracted to these early cars that have some subtle and some rather larger design differences from the cars that followed. Some of them include the emblem on the C-pillar of the roof, the extractor vents in the rear deck lid, vertical element for the defroster in the rear window. But also many feel that the very earliest of cars somehow seem to feel a bit more eager than some of the later cars that seem to be slightly more civilized, because I think they realized what a success it would have in the American market and what was perceived that the American market needed. This particular example as well comes to the Ardrain collections from a terrific local collector. And it's a very sentimental thing, because this car was restored by this fellow, Robin Foote, along with his son, Colin. And his son, Colin, was a great car enthusiast, and they shared great work and memories with working on cars together. And Colin, in fact, encouraged his dad to get a 240Z because he had had one when he was younger and had sold it, as many people building a family do. And quite unfortunately, Colin was killed when a driver who had had many traffic infractions ran through a red light and hit Colin as he was driving across the intersection. And the good that came from that was the passage of Colin's Law here in Rhode Island, which more closely tracked repeat motoring offenders. And so it's terrific to think about this 240Z, but all 240Zs, and the direct passion and connection which these cars engender in their owners and the enthusiasts. And I have to say that I am a 240Z enthusiast. As I said at the beginning of this, there's nothing like driving a sports car designed in the late 1960s, just the way they feel. This wonderful thin-rimmed, wood-rimmed wheel, the humps of the gauges on the dash, the view out the front with the wonderful bulge over the center of the engine, and the fenders on the side. It's just that totally romantic vision of what a sports car should be. And it's cocooning enough that you feel nice and cozy, but also the vision outside is very good, certainly much better than it would be in some later cars. So this is a car that you really want to use. And of course it also makes a terrific sound. There was a short time when Nissan itself marketed remanufactured or factory-endorsed restorations of the 240Z because the enthusiasm was so great. The program, unfortunately, did not last, and they built very few cars. But it was just an example of what a car can mean to a manufacturer, to its heritage, and to the people that really love it. This is a car that people connect passionately with, and one drive in it tells you exactly why. The sound, the feeling, the style, it's got everything. This is a true example of how Japanese cars have completely arrived in the collector car field.